Hello everyone. So you saw the title, you saw the thumbnail, you know what's going to happen. Let's get into it. I start off with the move d4, and my opponent goes knight f6, which enters to the Trompowsky defense. After my opponent plays e6, I go e4. And this is the big center variation, very reasonable. The point is that after the move bishop e7, I'm supposed to take, actually no. After bishop e7, I'm supposed to play e5, knight up, take, I get f4, I get knight c3, and I just have a big center like the variation name implies. But what happens in this game is my opponent plays something a little different. My opponent plays the move h6, which is a move. But silly old me, I got my lines mixed up, and I played the wrong move immediately. I blunder on move 4 with the move bishop h4. And I know what's going on. I know that I'm going to be losing a pawn. But I didn't think it was that bad at first. And this is the first pawn sacrifice of the game. So g5, and I go e5 instead, counterattacking the knight. After takes, I'm down a pawn, but what do I have to show for it? I have a couple of things. I have knight f3 to attack these two pawns. This pawn is very weak. His queen is out and a rout, so that could be a weakness at some point. He's never going to castle this way, which could be bad for him, and I don't know. I have chances. That's why I went into this position. I thought that I might be able to do something about it. So I start off the game with knight f3, of course, just a simple developing move, targeting the h4 pawn and keeping everything together. And I knew I was worse because I messed up on my theory, but I didn't think I was that much worse. It's only a pawn. I mean, pawns can come and go, but the next pawn will be coming and going a lot faster. So b6, I go c4, which I thought was very reasonable. Just simply taking some space in the center, which I desperately need. That's another one of the benefits of my position. I can do that. I can take space in the center. This is just simply a mistake after my opponent goes bishop b7, this whole idea. And I realized that I can't really play the move knight c3, because then he's going to take. And if I have to double my pawns, then my position will be losing. I wouldn't have any more compensation for the extra pawn. So this forces me to play bishop e2. My opponent, of course, follows the rook g8, obviously attacking the g-pawn. And I thought about a couple of ways to defend it. I was considering rook g1 here, because I just didn't want to castle into the attack. I was considering the move g3, allowing takes, but then I get my rook open, and maybe I have some counterplay there. But I didn't really want him to get rid of the doubled pawns. And eventually I realized that the pawn isn't actually that my king isn't actually that weak over on g1. So I decided to castle, which is the best move, and I'm very proud of this. Castling directly into my opponent's open file, my opponent's pawns, that's going to come to h3. It's scary. Don't get me wrong, but after h3, I just have g3, right? I'm fine. And if he tries to bring a pawn down like this, I mean, okay, even if he takes, my rook gets open. Everything is dandy. Oh, and the rule of you have to take towards the center when he does that doesn't really apply here because I don't really have a pawn on e4 to protect my f pawn. So it's perfectly okay to just open up my rook like this. And my opponent plays another good move. My opponent plays the move c5. And this is when I realized that my position isn't very good, and I have to do something drastic here. The reason being, of course, if I take on c5, then he takes on b2. He's gonna win back the c5 pawn, and I'm just gonna be down 2 pawns, and I didn't want that, so I decided to part with the pawn in my own way. And here's the second pawn sacrifice. I play knight c3, which is a mistake. Knight c3 is bad, but it's not actually that easy for black. It's not that easy for black to be able to exploit the reason why knight c3 is bad. Because after cd, I play the move knight b5. And let's see here. I'm threatening the pawn. I'm threatening a fork of the rook and the king. And this king is probably going to be stuck in the center because the c file is open. Are you really going to long castle into that? Are you really going to do that? Also the a7 pawn is weak. If he pushes a6, of course I get the fork. And so my opponent defends it. My opponent plays knight a6. What's funny is that the computer just says to sack the exchange. Just go knight c6. And even if I get this position, even if I get this, I'm actually much worse because he has this huge attack on my king. See, I can't take the knight because then I'd be checkmated over on the g2 square. And this is really bad. That would be really bad. If he had seen that, we wouldn't have a video today. But my opponent plays the move knight a6, which I thought was very reasonable. He's defending the pawn. And I thought about taking on d4. I really did. I really thought about taking on d4, but I ended up rejecting this move. I ended up rejecting knight b takes d4 because of the move bishop c5. And I thought that I just didn't really have anything there. I thought that my position was just probably worse after bishop c4 because he's threatening to take. And if he takes and goes here, he's just going to win a piece. So I can't allow that. And that's why I didn't take back the pawn immediately. And I found a very nice move. I found this is the second engine move. The second engine move. The computer says it's an inaccuracy, but it's actually like literally the same. You saw the eval bar jump from minus 3.2 to minus 3.3. Oh no. Oh no, terrible. That's such a huge increase. Oh, but what a big mistake I made. A3 is completely reasonable. And the idea is just to play b4 and then take on d4. And my opponent plays e5, which makes sense. He's trying to defend his pawn. But then I simply go b4, right? I simply go b4. And if you don't know that this is losing for white, for white, if you don't know this is losing for white, this position is hard to play. I mean, look at all the pressure on black's king. I got my knight here. My queen can probably join in the action from h5 if he ever plays e4. And this is kind of dangerous. The king is very, very exposed here. So my opponent kind of was getting a little nervous, and he's also down a minute. So it's a little bit scary. And my opponent makes an inaccuracy. My opponent plays a move that I didn't really understand. My opponent plays bishop e7. Bishop e7, to me, doesn't do anything. Okay, he's developing the bishop, right? And he's x-raying the h4 pawn so that he can move his queen. So then when his queen moves, he doesn't hang the pawn. But is that really what the position demands? Is that really what the position demands? I don't think so. I don't think that's what the position demands. And I have a plan. I just simply have a plan. My plan is to try and push c5 and bust open on the queen side. It's funny to say that this is the queen side where the queen is over on this side of the board, but to play c5 and bust open on the queen side. So I play rook c1 and I'm fulfilling my plan. It's hard for black to stop this. One of the best moves here is to play the move d3, just sacrificing a pawn. It's not truly a sacrifice because, oh, actually my bishop is trapped. Yeah, d3 would have been nice because after here he gets this move. That would be nice. That'd be nice. I admit I missed that, but I mean I'm down 2 pawns. What are you supposed to do? I play rook c1 and he misses d3. He plays the move queen g6, threatening a checkmate on g2. But this just allows me to do one of my normal plans, and I was always prepared to do this. I was always prepared to play the move g3. So I do. I play g3, and I'm fine. If takes, I'm going to take with the f pawn, and I don't really see a problem. I think I'm just like winning here. Well, not winning, but I think the pressure is gone for black. And he takes, which is a mistake. I take back with the f-pawn, opening up my rook, which is good. Again, taking with the h-pawn would have been a little bit bad because this file can be utilized by black. Most of the time this file can't be utilized, but in this case the file can. And I'd probably just be super losing, even more than I already am. So f takes is definitely the best move. My opponent loses the game. He blunders f6. And I have I have like a whole host of sacrifices that I completely miss. I miss every single one of these stunning sacrifices. The reason being is because I can take this pawn or this pawn. If this knight moves, what happens is that the queen is on the same diagonal as the king. So after the knight moves, I have bishop h5. I have bishop h5 skewering the queen to the king, and I'd be winning the game. And it's not even close. It's very clear that I'd be winning the game, even though I was sacked 2 pawns out of the opening. That's how gambits go sometimes. Sometimes you just simply crush your opponent. But I miss it. I completely miss the idea, and I play a move that keeps advantage, but it's not the best move. I played knight h4, which I thought was good. I thought it was reasonable because I thought that the f6 move blocked the bishop. So now after knight h4, I am attacking the queen, and I'm going to come to the f5 square. And I thought that was very good. I thought that was very good because the f5 square seemed like a very juicy square. And on the f5 square, I'd be threatening knight d6 because after bishop takes, knight takes with a fork on this bishop. Technically, the knight can be trapped easily, but you can also be defended easily. So I should be okay there. After knight h4, though, my opponent realizes that the queen would be x-rayed, would be skewered, I mean, on the king. So he moves the queen. He goes queen at e4. And I, of course, play bishop f3, very reasonable move. I have to stop, like, queen h1 stuff, so bishop f3 just makes lots of sense. And my opponent gives me a check. I come up to g2 because I thought it was very reasonable. Technically, the computer says it's inaccurate once, I don't know what it wants. Does it want rook f2 or something? No, it wants king h1. Okay, actually it wants king g2. I really hate that the game review engine gives these symbols. They're like almost always wrong, but either way. My opponent plays e4, but this allows me another very nice move. This allows bishop h5 check first. The king moves, and then I have knight f5. And now my knights are actually very, very strong. My knights are getting in. My knights have this square. My knights are about to take the bishop, which could be useful. This pawn is weak. Like, his position is falling apart. I thought queen g5 was the best move. He actually has a very nice move here. He has a very nice move. He has the move, he finds this during the game. He finds queen d2 check. Queen d2 check is very nice because it looks like it just hangs a queen. And I have to take it. I have to take because if I don't, I mean, I don't know what I'm doing. And after check, he's going to win the queen back with ed. First and foremost, he should have taken the bishop first. But I'm still better here, even though I'm down 2 pawns, because of black's stupid structure. Look at this. He's got pawn island, tripled isolated pawn, and then this a7 pawn, the rook is glued to it. So I probably just win the game here if he did that, and I do. He doesn't take the bishop first. First he takes the queen, and then I have to go rook d1, and then he takes the bishop. Rook takes. And my opponent brings his rook to the c file, which is very normal. But what it allows, is the h7 pawn is now hanging. The h6 pawn is now hanging with a threat. These pawns are always perpetually hanging, and I think about this for a while. I think about this decision for a while, and I end up taking on d2, because I thought that after rook c4, I'd probably be able to be up a pawn after maybe knight d4, and then I can take on a7, and then I should at the very least be up a pawn. So rook c4, and I take on d4, but it's a miss. First, what I should have done, I should have taken on h6 first. And the reason being, and I miss this completely. The reason being is that if my opponent goes to g5, which I thought was very natural, I just missed this fork. Forking the queen and the king and the rook. And if he goes to g6, I actually just have knight f7 check. And wherever the king moves, I fork him on d6 with this rook. I missed that. I missed that. So that's why rook f8 would be the best move. But I missed that entirely. And I ended up taking the pawn. My opponent moved his king to e8 because he's worried about certain attacks with like knight e6 stuff, since this rook is pinning the pawn to the king in that line. So he moves the king, and I move the knight back, and I'm threatening a fork on the d6 square of the rook and the king, since both knights are defending it. And after bishop takes, I should be just winning material, right? My opponent comes back with the rook. I take on a7 with tempo. My opponent goes rook e6, and I find this nice move, knight c8. And what this does, this targets the bishop first and foremost, and after the bishop moves, then I might be able to have knight d6. And I thought that was very decent. So bishop f8, I play knight d6, takes, and he brings the king up to e7. So I have to move the knight again. I go knight f5 check there, and I take on h6. Very useful. Now, rook g5. So the move I thought he was going to play, but now I can just move my knight back to f5. And at this point, you can see that I moved my knight like 8 times in a row, which is pretty funny, but they're the best moves, so there's not much else to say. My opponent comes back with the knight. I give a check on d6. Not the best move. I should have actually played an interesting move. I should have played h4, kicking the rook out. If rook there, then I have a fork, so he has to go back to probably like g6 or something. And then I have this move, rook c3, now that the knight is no longer attacked, and I'm able to get in on the c file, and I should be winning. If here I have rook c6 takes, and then at least I have rook d6 just attacking everything, and I should just be easily gonna win another pawn, and I'm crushing. I don't see that line. I go check, come back, and I play this move knight c4, which I thought was very reasonable. I'm targeting the b6 pawn, and I'm keeping everything in line. Now knight d5 happens, and I find the move h4. Move h4 makes a lot of sense. Basically just saying that I'm attacking the rook, and the rook has to stay guarding the knight, so rook h5 is the only move. And then I'm probably gonna I don't know, I was probably gonna, yeah. Oh, I remember my reason. I played h4 because I wanted to play rook d3, but rook d3 didn't work because of knight f4 check when picking up the rook. So I played h4 to get the rook off this file, so then I could play rook d3 and kick him out. So h4, my opponent played rook h5, and I completely missed that rook g4 would have just, the move g4 would have just won the knight. I completely missed that g4 wins the knight. It wins the knight because the rook can't actually stay guarding it, and that would be a nice way to end the game, but you know, whatever happens. I go rook d3, which was my plan, and my opponent finds this nice move a5. I probably should have taken on d5. Taking on d5 would have just clearly been winning. I don't know why I didn't do this. I guess I was kind of scared of like rook e3 stuff, but then just a4. If rook a3, then a5, and if he pushes the c pawn, I mean b5 happens, he can't push anymore, he goes check. I come to f3, he goes c2 would be worse, so he goes a2. I can probably just take on c3, takes, and then I'm just in a position that's completely winning. Since I have the passers, I have 2 passers, and his passer here is so far away from its goal, so I just be completely winning. I missed this line, but either way, I played the move knight a5. I thought it was very reasonable. My opponent gave me a check on e3, and I put the king on h3, making sure I wasn't blundering anything. I spent a little time on this move. My opponent plays d5, and I bring my knight to b7, which I thought was very reasonable. Technically, I should have played knight b3. The idea is the same. I want to put the knight on c5, but knight b3 has the other idea of putting the knight on d4, so it just opens up more squares for my knight, which would have been better. I should have done that, but it's okay. I go knight b7. My opponent goes knight c4, attacking my rook, so I take this pawn. After takes, I'm completely winning. Of course, I've been completely winning like the entire game except for the opening, but my opponent is able to take on a3, and I missed that the knight on a3 defends this pawn from far away. When I took, after this move, I was calculating, and I just completely forgot that the knight on a3 defends b5. So I thought I was just going to win another pawn, but I was wrong. Knight a3, I have to play knight c5. My opponent plays rook e2. I give him a check, and I come back to d3, attacking the knight. My opponent goes knight c4. I go rook f3, attacking the pawn. Knight d7, attacking the pawn. And my opponent goes rook b2, actually just completely blundering the pawn. Like here, it's actually very drawish because this pawn is weak. After he can defend this pawn, and this H pawn isn't really that much of a factor, so I kind of messed up here. But luckily for me, my opponent also messed up, and I took. This is the best move. Don't let the media confuse you. This is the best move. My opponent takes on b4. I come back. I thought this was very reasonable. My opponent goes here, and I blunder, actually. I play knight c3, and this is now a draw because of the simple move rook b3, and I can't move my knight. I have to defend my rook immediately. If I don't defend my rook, then I'm going to lose the game, right? So I go king g2, only move. If I go king g4 up, then I'd lose to a fork, so I can't have that happen, so I go king g2. My opponent goes b4 here. He gives me a check. I go here, there, takes, and it's actually just a draw, but my opponent has 10 seconds on the clock. Very important. I go knight c3, up, and I'm just pre-moving at this point. My opponent queens. I give him a check first so that he has to waste more time. Takes. I go king h4 up, and I give him a check, and he loses on time in this position. Very lucky. Very lucky that I managed to do that, but I really did blunder. I really did make a lot of mistakes in this game. The loss of theory in the opening was just stupid. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have like sacked like all of my pawns, but it was necessary, and I'm glad I won the game in the end. I ended up playing this game at 79% accuracy. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys found this instructive. All the above, you know. Good evening and good night.